And to be clear, this is from my personal initiative. Hello, my name is Omar. The purpose of this video is to translate a study that was done in the University of Colombia, and I will leave all the references below. And it's just to translate something that was said in Spanish to the language of English. I do not take no credit or anything of that sort on this video. What I'm doing is relaying a message, and I'm translating it from Spanish to English with the hopes that more and more people are aware of what is this church that's called the light of the world, in Spanish, la luz del mundo. From a sociological standpoint, we will be able to understand and look into the history, the work, and the current standing that this church has amongst society. This is the hopes of this video, and I hope I'm very clear. And if you have any questions, please inbox me personally. Like my friends who respect me and I respect them have asked about my belief systems, and they have kept this private because of the issues that are going on. Now this is my way of publicly saying a little bit of the history of our church, or the church that I belong to. Now this is my personal effort, my personal initiative, my best efforts to translate it from Spanish to English and use the same verbatim as her. So bear with me if it's not 100%. It's very close. The academic investigation about the light of the world, its doctrine, its expansion, and in its international history for the last 96 years. The presenter is Ana Ochoa, and she is from the Faculty of Human Sciences and Economics from the National University of Colombia in Medellin. There is this boom that has arisen from many different factors. One, for the phenomena religious that have been acquired around the world. Today, we see all over the places of different religious beliefs, and there has been a history of what is happening in the country, in inner cities. One of them that is very close to us, very proper. And what is very interesting, it is to know up to what point we are aware of this. I want to start off with this phrase from Miss Ana Ochoa, to treat the religious phenomenon. Previously, it was custom that the anthropologists, sociologists, historians, and almost everybody from social sciences with their own theories that right now we say and we find a bit drastic to be able to analyze a phenomenon that is changing so much and is so integral to us. From there on, there's a lot of postgrads and a lot of studies who only name this religious movements. Even the very own studies who have traditionally studied this now changes to religious movements. So a lot of postgrads are now only called religious movement, the new religious movement. Even the same faculties of theology have now changed this religious movement. So why do I want to focus on this quote from Ana Maria Vidal? Given that the dynamics of religious movements takes a very long periods of time, all groups should be explained from their origin, where they derive from, to be able to install themselves and evolve in the Colombian context. So what does this mean? In order to see this phenomenon from the outside, we will be betting on a theory derived from a hypothesis, looking how to prove something, and it's very distinct, the dynamic that Ana Maria proposes, because she says, let's not look from them from the outside, but get to know them from within, from the inside, from their doctrine. The course, the mastery course in which I studied this phenomenon in depth from Mexico in Colombia, we will see their development and their actual standing. I will always be comparing what is their doctrine, how they think it, and how they make a parallel, and how can we see it from the outside, especially from an academic standpoint. So then, let's begin with this part. A balance of the development and actual situation are for this next reason. This type of religions in their beginnings, which start off in 1926, its founder, who is Aaron Joaquin, is a person who comes from a military background that feels very, let's say, drawn for what is religious, leaves the army and then begins to seek religions. He is close to a few pastors, and he has what is known in anthropology, the fundamental myth. But within the church is called the calling of this church. This founder then receives a revelation in 1926, the 6th of April of 1926, where he listens and hears in his official statement, he listens to the voice of God and his name was Aaron before. In his official statement, he listens to the God. This is very similar if we do a parallel in what is the doctrine in that time compared to the people of Israel. In the case of Abraham, he is told to leave his land and his parents and go to the land where God had for him. His name is also changed. So there's a parallel of the beginning of the light of the world that starts with Aaron Joaquin. He is in a city named Monterrey, located in the north of Mexico, and he is also told to leave this land and start walking until I tell you where you should stop, because that will be the city that I have chosen. So then this is how this takes off and how we arrive to the city of Guadalajara in the temple of Hermosa Provincia, the seed. And it is in Guadalajara that he listens to the voice of God and tells him to stop there. This travel was done by foot, totally by foot. Beginning April 4th, it took him about trajectory was done by foot, and it started 6th of April of 1926, and he walked all the way to December. So it's 8 months of nothing but walking, following the railroad tracks, in which the Apostle Aaron, who he will be called in the interior of the light of the world. Along the way, he's doing a lot of miracles in which he is stopping by. 1926 is very important to Mexico because Mexico is in a Cristera war. This is a Mexican contest that's very strong because it is a war in which a persecution is planted against the Catholic Church. This Cristera war, it's a war in which a persecution is planted in a way against the Catholic Church. So there is this communist imagination in which there's a community sense that from a lot of people that are apparently are going to attack the Catholic Church. They feel as if the government is attacking them, and it's a very cruel, strong war, because you will see images of countrymen, even though they are barefoot, they are well armed, and you ask, where do they get these weapons from? And this is the war that was taking on in Mexico. Just in this time is when the Church of the Other World starts and arises. So following the path of Aaron Joaquin from Monterrey all the way to Guadalajara, he stops in 1926 in Guadalajara, and he receives a lot, almost double persecution for wanting to speak a different word that apparently is new, a new doctrine, that apparently doesn't have nothing to do with Catholicism and has nothing to do with other Christian beliefs, but rather starts to call attention. And also the part where he does miracles, the Apostle Aaron. He stays in Guadalajara, but in Guadalajara there's a phenomenon. And this phenomenon, the one that I want to, before we talk about the churches that are so visible, is because Aaron Joaquin does a work that is very interesting. He sees that his people are kicked from one place to another. The police are chasing them. The Catholic Church chasing them for their beliefs. And they feel like they don't fit in Guadalajara. They stone them, they lynch them, and it's a very small group that begins. So he begins to think, and it is also inspired and has a revelation to buy a property, to build a community. And this community, new revelation, a new inspiration to buy a big lot. So from there on, they start to live in a community. So what does this mean? This land is acquired on the outskirts of Guadalajara. And if anybody knows the history of Mexico, I could say with data that Guadalajara can be named the most Catholic church in the world, even more Catholic than the very Rome. You speak about the phenomenon of the Virgin Mary. So this strong establishment of the Mexican Catholicism, the epicenter is in Guadalajara, Mexico. So the Catholics are very resistant to the preaching of the Apostle Aaron. So that is why they go to the outskirts of the city to build this community. And it is this colony. It's 15 hectares, more than 15 acres. This is the international seed now, and it looks like this. But when they started in 1926, it did not have these dimensions. It was very humble people. It started from zero, but with a purpose that exited, it went beyond what was normal. It was a thing that people would see as something strange because they saw this at the outskirts of the church, and people did not know what was going on with this church. So what happens with the phenomenon in Guadalajara? They start to grow and expand, not only around what is the city of Guadalajara, but spreads to other states, other departments, and it also crosses over to South America. And this happens all the way to 1964. This happens all the way to 1964 when Apostle Aaron dies and then Apostle Samuel arrives, because this is how they call them, apostles. Apostles because their doctrine, within the doctrine, it's an apostolic teaching. This means, or they project themselves as the restoration. What does this mean? That you go to a church of the light of the world. It's like if you step back in time 2,000 years to be witness, how would they pray, how would they sing, how would they baptize, how is their preaching, because they consider that nobody has come over to the world they consider that nobody has came bigger than Jesus Christ to change, to modify, or adapt like a new form, and this same doctrine needs to remain the same. They consider if God is the same, then the doctrine needs to remain the same, and the church will remain the same. So with this community project, they revive, they make their big bet to make a community, to live in a community like the primitive church did, like the first Christians. If you immerse yourself in the scripture, in the Bible, of how the Christians lived, they say that they would sell their properties and they would live in community spaces to be aware of one another. This is the big phenomenon that the light of the world has, because wherever they arrive, they buy big properties of more than 15 hectares or acres, and they will be known as barrios, or beautiful provinces. So there's beautiful provinces, and the main one is in Guadalajara, which is the main seed, and is the one that we see. There's a calzada, a main street that leads to it, and here we see a night shot, an aerial night shot, and we can see that all the streets merge to the temple. So the college, the university, the hospital, all the community program, they have it, and it marches forward like a marvel, and they call this beautiful province, and it marches like 1,000 wonders, because to be able to have all those people unite in the temple and to be able to carry out this community project comes with a lot of results. They are organized in different groups. They have kids groups, youth groups, married groups, widow groups, and there's activities for everybody. So they are always aware not only of what's spiritual, or what can take place internally of a human being, but also it is their duty to take this doctrine, this Christian doctrine, to other spaces. And these spaces for them is a community space. We keep seeing some pictures, some institutions, some hospitals, some universities. So then we will go to what calls our attention the most. So I imagine each and one of you are from the Nacho area there in Colombia. If any of y'all remember when we used to have the exit to the National Street, in front of the university, there was a small little ranch that said the light of the world, and people would pass through there and not be aware. I don't know if today all of a sudden you are more aware of what is going on around the Nacho, but this small temple or church that was made up of cardboard, in this moment it's in the front main avenue, and today is a building that's 4 stories high, and it's constructed like a temple. In reality, this means that the church, the light of the world, for these same reasons, is going to be well known, because it starts with a strategy is a visible one, to be hidden or small houses. The next big bet is to make big temples and locate it where people could see us, in avenues, in more visible places. This phenomenon, visible phenomenon, starts then with the second apostle, Apostle Samuel Joaquin. It's 50 years that during the administration of the Apostle Samuel Joaquin, he expands not only through South America, even as far as the 5 continents. It grows from the Patagonia all the way to Alaska, because of a matter of fact, the seed has a replica in Punta Arenas, Chile, and in Alaska. And here they show that expansion and territorialism. And in Colombia, there is approximately 150 temples of this church. And out of curiosity, I would like to know, raise your hands, if you guys have seen a temple within the city, or if you were traveling that says the light of the world. 1, 2, 3, 4. I need my glasses. How embarrassing. 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's say it's 8 of us, and it's a few people to know that there is 150 temples all over Colombia, and in the metropolitan area, for example, there's 15. One of them is downtown, one of them is right in front of the institution that has been visible all its existence in front of the school. Let's make a small imaginary trip. What would we be thinking of if this temple that you see right here, what does it look like? It looks like the Taj Mahal. But let me tell you where this Taj Mahal is. It's in Tapachula, in the wilderness, in the Mexican wilderness, in the border between Mexico and Guatemala. What happens is then with these temples? Look at this next one. It looks like a boat. We have the Taj Mahal, the ones in the United States, one in LA, one in Houston. Each one of these temples has something that's particular. From the architecture point of view, is very particular. When you see other religions, let's say the Jehovah's Witnesses, it is very easy to identify the same temple with the same structure. Also the Adventists, it's as if they replicate. Even the Catholic cathedrals, one can know the crosses, the bells, and one can identify them really quick. With the light of the world, there is a phenomenon that is particular to them, because whoever builds that temple is the very own members of that church, and it is them that with a contest they ask different architects, different designers to turn in their ideas, their proposals, and it is the same church that pick and choose what design they go with, because it is them that are going to build them. So there is something that appropriates them to the light of the world. After passing through the transit of the two apostles, there is one that is the actual one, that is the apostle named Nason Joaquin Garcia, and he had just started his administration of work from the 8th of December 2014. So let's say he has 5 years. And let's see that in Mexico, this church is well known. In Mexico, the light of the world was known to begin with its project of education. And we will go back to see the work of this administration. So when we say about alphabetization, for example, the beautiful province in Guadalajara, there was a time where that was the only piece of land in Mexico that could say that they had a white flag and they were free of analfabetismo. The proposal was to grow in education, to form ourselves, to build schools, to build colleges. They have all the gammas of universities and educative projects. And what has come from the administrative era of the actual apostle, who is named Nason Joaquin, and it is to work a subject that is very important in Mexico, which is a laical state. There is 2 states in the world that we can say that they have at least one transparent bed through the Constitution, and they have tried to carry it through, and it's France and Mexico. Us as Colombians, our Constitution says that we're a laical state, but that's just in paper and intention, but it's not laical in real life, not even in institutions or in educative proposals or in a daily life. And you can prove this from the Supreme Court. There is a huge cross in the Supreme Court of Justice. You guys can be well aware that when you arrive to an airport, we see that there's a special designated space to pray, and it's not for any religion. You see that it's a Catholic cross, a Catholic space. And you go to the hospitals, you see the crosses in every hospital room, or an emblem or a symbol that reminds us of this creed, that leaves it very clear that we do not have a state that is laical, meaning we can't separate the religion from our daily life, or constitutionally or politically. But in Mexico, this church has defended this state, this free state, because it's only guarantee. If I am talking and telling you that Mexico is the most Catholic place in the world, if they do not fight for that laical state, this church will not exist. It is very, very difficult for a church to exist if they don't have a guarantee from the Constitution. And they have these guarantees, and they are stubborn to defend them. And they have these warranties and defend them. So who, being a minority, who have they allied with? They have allied with all the other religions that fight for the human rights. So not only they have the visibility in architectural temples, but they have also built a career defending the laical state. For example, let's look. Liberty in religions according to the laical state. If we see here in this image, here's an institution of Catholics with the right to choose. So there is no, if we look in the background of this image, there's Catholics that also are fighting for the same right. There's no extension of religion or nothing. The same necessity to defend the laical state has made them unite with everybody. These are the colonies, beautiful provinces, and I would like to stop in this one because this is in Bello, Colombia. I don't know if you guys have seen exiting Biquia in the front, in the top part of the mountain in the north, Quitasol. There is 16 hectares that about 30 years ago this church bought, and little by little they have developed this project, this community project in that place. This community project, let's say that it could not have been possible to install it in the Star. The Star is known to be very Catholic. In the other communities, it would be difficult to find 16 free hectares or acres to bet on this project of magnitude. And in this moment when they bought this property, the train hadn't arrived there, roads, clinics, it was very, very empty. It almost looked abandoned. I don't know if any of your families remember the charcos of Niquea. Nobody. So this is another generation at ease. Look at the work, how they are accustomed to do the things. They are called faenas, different temples that are around the metropolitan area, and they translate themselves to build the temple, the homes, schools, colleges, and to develop this project. And this calls attention. This calls the attention. Above all things, they have a feast that's done mainly in Guadalajara. But since it's so difficult for everybody to gather in Guadalajara, for example, in 1994, it was done there in Colombia, and also in 2015. There has been various Holy Suppers done in Colombia. This place of Niquea, beautiful province Niquea, is projected to be the epicenter of all of South America, so that the people who want to take the Holy Supper don't have to travel all the way to Guadalajara. They can rather concentrate in Colombia. This is the Holy Supper that is done in Guadalajara. As you can see, people do not fit inside the church. The temple is now a touristic point. It is offered as soon as you get off the airplane. It has won a contest at a architectural level. So this became something very particular in that zone that also grew, and the city ate them around them. And they did not only grow on the outside of the skirts, the city grew around them. So they now became part of the city of Guadalajara. This city, this image that you see here is the blueprint of what could be the colony in El Salvador. But it is important to be able to see the development of the light of the world, that the light of the world, its colonies are not enough. They have grown so much in membership numbers and in project that they are now doing cities the light of the world, and they consist of more than 100+ hectares. So let's think of the actual projects are named cities the light of the world, and it consists of 100 hectares plus. So imagine the dimensions of this city projects. These cities are proposed as smart cities. It is everything that takes to develop a magnitude of project, and it has given results in Mexico, El Salvador. It has given results in Mexico, United States, El Salvador, and in Colombia. It is expected to finish first the community project in Colombia in Bello, and to then bet on the second phase to form a city that's called the light of the world. Once arrives there, we ask ourselves, a city the light of the world? And ask ourselves 100 hectares, but we don't stop and tell ourselves, and we're not aware that the Mennonites have bought about 3,000 hectares out in the country. So then we say, what do we have to worry about, or what should call our attention? Once we see a phenomenon and we see it grow and expand, and we don't know that there is projects that other religions have been taking place. I want to enter in the current situation. You guys will see this image of multitudes of people. It's more than 100,000 people in the United States celebrating the Holy Supper because Guadalajara, even though they have 3 barrios or 3 communities, those 3 communities are not enough for the more than 500,000 that gather there. So then, it is required to make this festivity in every country. What happened with the United States? That it is the place that we are going to direct our attention. And it is because the United States, the phenomenon that a religion like Blanc Carte said that has a Mexican cut because it surges in Mexico. And with all this politics that we see from Trump and what we're going to work from Samuel, and we're going to see what Huntington says when there is 2 clashes of civilizations and how they see an American identity. They see this and see it as something very uncomfortable. Not only uncomfortable because it bothers that these Mexicans came over, but they grew here in the United States, this religion. But furthermore, they trace back the temples and they see and they find out that the temples are enormous and they call people's attention, and this religion got out of their hands. The religion that they thought they had controlled with a little bit of people at the outsides of Guadalajara. Look at the dimension of this reunion. So much more that even Trump, he sent to ask some of the senators that were in this festivity, how come he was invited, how come he wasn't there? So then it is here that we start to see from the academic point of view that there is not more, something else more that's more academic or political that is this phenomenon. And it is required to be observed and read in other lines in a very precautionary way. So we see that this phenomenon, it needs to be observed and seen in different lines. I know that the professor says that there's different post grades. For sure, you might have come across with the theory of Samuel Phillips Huntington, and 2 of his books that gave a lot of foot to controversies and problems. The fact that the first clash that happened in 1996, and this one that I want to make a reference to of who we are, the challenges of the national identity, American identity, written in 2004. It says the discussion centers in the national American identity and the possible threat that constitutes the Latin American immigration and the possible threat that the Latin American immigration possesses in a big state. According to the author, this could divide the country in 2 people, 2 languages, and 2 cultures. This man, this academic man from Yale, a person that has a lot of credibility in his studies because of his trajectory, and besides that, he was an assessor for the White House. He was part of the public relations of the United States with Latin American. I believe that he reached a lot of his theories and permeated a lot of his theories in the part of that government in the United States. And it got to the point where people stood up against what he was saying because he was almost making it a for sure thing. So think about it. There's 40 millions of Latinos. A lot of those are minorities in the United States, but out of those 40 millions, 23 of them are Mexican. And those 23 Mexicans were in Texas, California. Why? Because that used to be Mexican territory. That's what it's called. Los Angeles, San Francisco, Santana, meaning that was from Mexico. So migration is not that they come, but they were there. That was their territory. But although once those religions come and install themselves on this territory, of course they are going to be welcomed by Latinos, Mexicans, but take a note that the generations of Latinos are going to be very different. It is possible that the fathers or the grandparents only speak Spanish, but those who have grown up speak English, study in the universities, North American universities, and they have a way of life that has been Americanized, which meant that they refute the theory of Huntington because they considered it racist, xenophobe, and in one way or another, they thought that the United States, his study was admitting or allowing the United States a policy against immigration against Latin Americans. This is very important to consider it, and this is important to read in between the lines of what we're going to see, what is the phenomenon of the light of the world. So then, let's see from another point of view, academic point of view. We receive a religion, and for them, this religion is unknown. You know that the north of the United States is able to populate its area because of the American dream. The American dream was not only for those who wanted to leave to the United States, but also the English and Europeans also were seeking a refugee in North America, and they arrived there and they developed their life. But they are going to characterize themselves to be Protestant. So the theory of Samuel Huntington was Catholicism is going to arrive and it's going to bring regression. It's going to bring people that do not like to work, an amount of myths that are astonishing, and above all, to treat other creeds as enemies. So like Muslims have been treated. So that's why I'm reading, or that is why I'm doing an emphasis in the book of Martha Nussbaum on the new intolerance in religion, and what she develops throughout her book is the fear that people have against what's unknown. And even more, if this religion comes from everywhere and everybody's dressed in white, it's a phenomenon that they are not aware of, and they create all of a sudden a resistance. But because of that unknown, because of the myths, the prejudging about all the religions that have arisen in the United States. Why does Mexico appear once again? And we go to the Mexican president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, and we arrive to the current situation of the light of the world. So one, let's make a resume real quick. The Mexicans believed that that church was going to remain a small church, and it was going to remain far in Guadalajara. It grew, and it grew all over the world, and now they have a festivity of more than 500,000 in the city of Guadalajara, which is the biggest festivity, even bigger than the Festival of Books in Guadalajara. And all of Guadalajara awaits this festivity because in restaurants, hotels, airports, it is a big income, an impressive income for that city, and it was well seen for those people. And they thought they were going to remain there, and they were never going to move from there. But they started moving, and I'm going to tell you where it got to hurt the most in a very profound way. Let's say the Mexican establishment, that class that is very Catholic, Aristocratic, and that last year, the 5th of May, there was this concert in Beautiful Arts building. Beautiful Arts, it's like the Mexican cathedral for excellence. It goes even further than what could be a government building or another part. For them, Bellas Artes or Beautiful Arts building was a concert done in Bellas Artes. It was not religious, it was an opera, and it coincides that a lot of people from this religion who were the participants of this, they were the singers, they were going to do this show, they were going to accompany the symphonic orchestra of the Navy, the Mexican Navy. So then, it seemed, and it really was a cultural event, it was a concert, but apparently having the presence of the apostle, being in the same building, his presence, which he never made a religious message, he simply participated as a normal person in that auditorium. But not only the auditorium was full, but also the streets. It was blocks and blocks of people who knew that the apostle was in Bellas Artes, who wanted to see him. There were others who were invited, like the director of the governors of Mexico, And a lot of people that wanted to know what was going on there, and they wanted to take pictures, they wanted to get to know the apostle. The same public figures wanted to take a picture with him. There was nothing religious about this concert. And this caused a lot of, let's say, drama. And this caused a lot of friction in Mexico. They will see a lot of these different recognisements given to the apostle by public figures, which is not something new, because everywhere that the apostle goes, any tour that he takes, apostolic tours that he takes in general, the mayor of the city gives them the keys of the city. There's a lot of cities in the United States that have streets named after the apostles, because that is possible in the United States. They got recognisements from universities, from public offices, because they carry on a public work, a community work that is very big. So then when they arrive to these cities, and even when there is earthquakes or catastrophes, the first ones who sent humanitarian help, for example, here in Colombia, it happened a lot with Armero, with the earthquake of Armenia, and they have always been aware to see what happens and be able to help and make themselves not only recognized by people, but also governments, politicians, and those who are guiding. So they receive a lot of recognisements. This was not a problem until, let's say, they arrived the peak, which was the place or the building called Bellas Artes. So why was this not a problem before? When they went to Bellas Artes, the Mexican president had to come out and explain and defend the laical state and defend what happens with the churches, because there was a scandal, a mediatic scandal in the media of why the light of the world was in Bellas Artes. Well, simply because in Mexico, the light of the world is very uncomfortable in a country that is, even though they feel they are laical and they profess the Catholic creed in a free state that gives freedom of religion, they profess immensely the Catholic creed, which has been diminishing in a great big way. In the corporation pluralism and the investigative group in which Professor Mercedes is also part of, and they are organizing this study, we are studying this phenomenon not only in this country, other countries, not only in other countries, but we have also taken it upon ourselves to study in Colombia to see if this happens here as well. And what has happened with the religious studies, and how do we treat this study? You know census, and any census that has been done in your home, you are aware that the questions asked, the questions are always, are you Catholic or not? There is no other lecture that gives options of what religion do you belong to, and almost always the answer in the census reflect or allow that study to see itself as 90% Catholic or a very high percentage of Catholics. But this phenomenon, we have learned how to study and get a feel for it with other methods or techniques. And it is one that we found in Guadalajara, for example. And it is to pay attention and see street by street this phenomenon in construction of temples or in places of worship. So we did an example of this, and we did a study in the center of Medellin, Colombia, and it's called Approximation in the Pluralism of Religious. It's called Approximation of Religious Pluralism. And we said in the center of Medellin, we're going to find more than 20 or 30 religions. Take a guess of how many religions we found. I heard numbers. What do you guys imagine that we found in the center, the downtown area of the city? How many? 50? It was 91 in the center. So we started and told ourselves amongst our group, this wonderful group of investigators, and I see Mario here, and it makes me happy because Mario was part of this anthropologic, sociological, historians, communicators, socialists, newscast. We all went and did a trace
of this center, and we found something. When we start tracing and mapping that area, we found out that if we are going to remain all the time with the information from the census, we are not going to have real data of a phenomenon that is changing. For example, in Brazil, there's a new religion every 24 hours. Every 24 hours. What I want to say is a phenomenon that is boiling, that is moving, that this investigation was done in 2012. It covered 2012, 2013, and we took out a book that covered the statistics of this time. And I assure you that if we go back and we pulse again those statistics, not only are the statistics going to be bigger, but some of these religions have fused with one another, one of them disappeared, or they changed names. So it's a phenomenon that is very difficult to chase, and to be able to leave the data in a permanent way. And to believe that this religion is going to maintain is very difficult. With the light of the world, there is something very particular to them. And it is what we have been studying in the University of Antioquia with the spiritual trajectory that the youth members have in this church, because there's options. The spiritual trajectory that the youth members have today, and it is to say, they can like yoga, they could participate in Catholic celebrations because it's family members, and they give a whole tour of spirituality. They do not only focus on one religion, they allow themselves to be involved of everything that is going on around them. And with the light of the world, something that happens is when somebody arrives to that church, they stay. And this allows us to study this phenomenon, that it's a religion that allows us to get close and study them, like we have been studying other religions. So what will happen with the academic point of view? I'm going to go very fast. What is going to happen with the phenomenon from the academic point of view? This man is Massimo Introvigne. He is an Italian sociologist of intellectual property from Italy, who is a intellectual property consultant and also the founder and director of the Studies of New Religion. It's a international web of academics that studies different religious movements. And this guy says in 2018, the religion of biggest growth in the world is now a cliche. The Mormons used that slogan for an era, and until now, their growth slowed down. But now he says that the church, the light of the world, never sleeps. The ones who sleep are those who study religions and have not studied this church in particular. And he says that it is the one with the biggest growth in the world. Outside of Asia, the light of the world, whose seat is in Guadalajara, Mexico, could be the movement who has the biggest growth. It could be the biggest movement in Mexico. It is not impossible for it to grow even bigger than the Asiatic groups that I have mentioned. This is the biggest group with the biggest growth all over the world. This study was done in Italy. Politically, Mexicans get uncomfortable of how they leave Guadalajara, and in one way or another, they find themselves inside of Bellas Artes. And in the other side, we have the academics saying that this is the biggest church with the biggest growth in the world. So this is creating noise. Noise that I want to say does not derive from them. If you go to any of their colonies, they are not the ones making the noise. There is a noise that is externally. Those who are studying them and those academics. I also found this thesis of history. I found this historic thesis directed by René de la Torre, which has been the person that has known this phenomenon the most and reading about it. And look at this section where he gives acknowledgments. This student says, my visits to the Mexican district, and he thanks everybody, and I'm going to start from here. He says, in respect to the Presbítero Ornelas, an illustrated person from my birthplace of Guadalajara, in which I was able to dialogue openly about my thesis. And he also helped me to think about the Catholic strategies to stop the growth of the light of the world in the west side of the city. So it is incredible to find in a thesis to find this information in 2016. An intention so, let's say, open, decided to stop a religion in part by the Catholic Church in that space that is Guadalajara. So what happens with the mediatic situation, things that are going on, and I will turn to the academy in this part. It is because we can do a reading from the outside, but the reading from the interior of this doctrine, it tells us that they are going to grow because it is written prophetically. So they are going to arrive to many places. So where and who is worried about this, and who came up with the idea to stop this church, and why? Or why would this bother somebody? What will be the problem of their growth? Because anywhere that they arrive, they have a slogan. A better citizen, or rather, a good Christian is a better citizen. They are not those who, for example, prohibit medicine, some sort of medical intervention. On the contrary, I have a link here where I can see the beginnings or the principles that they stand by. Whether they be religious or pro-life, they consider science a gift from God. So who can this church really make somebody uncomfortable? They grow, but they also grow economically. So what needs to be, or what wants to be stopped? Just like these colonies or these cities, if you project 10, 15 years from now, when they are going to be a lot more visible because they will have cities, and they will be a lot more, and there will be many more of them. This starts to make some governments uncomfortable. Some governments and some religions in which not only there is some sort of competition, but there is a phenomenon in the United States, and that many of those temples that belong to other churches and are now being left empty, this religion comes and buys them and adapts them and makes them adequate to fit the needs of the light of the world. So it's a religion that is all of a sudden uncomfortable for a government that, like the one of Trump, that doesn't want Mexicans, Latin Americans, and he doesn't want to see them grow and to be visible inside of his politics. It is very uncomfortable for these religions that, because it may seem that they are giving them more space and even leaving them or facilitating them, all these temples, it is very uncomfortable for the Mexican people. I will retract myself from saying Mexican people. It is not a problem for the Mexican people. No, it is the second religion that has the most growth compared to Catholicism. It is to say that the biggest membership, it is this of the light of the world, and it has grown, let's say, alongside with governments because they do not subscribe themselves neither from left or right or center. No, they work with the government that they are under. They work, let's say, with the government that is guiding them. They work with the government that corresponds to each of their areas. So I believe that the actual balance, because we're going to enter a very delicate part, and each one of you needs to make your own equations. And right now we're going to have questions, and we will look for possible answers. A year ago, exactly the 3rd of June, in the United States, in Los Angeles, they stopped the Apostle Nason, which is the actual director of the light of the world. And up to this date, he's still in prison because he has charges that up to this point, they have not been able to find any proof or evidence. So we're going to see this actually, and how this has been up to this day. He's still under custody, and he is in custody because there are charges that up to this point they have not been proven or evidence has been found. So we have this current situation according to the reading that we are managing. So based on this actual situation, and the reading that we are doing, we will see how this has been managed. There's a mediatic situation, and we're going to handle this in all aspects, whether it be political, religious, or even from the spectacle. We have a society in which the use and abuse of the media has permitted that there's not an investigation or a follow-up many times of the things that are spoken and are investigated in a penal way. So then, we will see how this man arrives to the point where he is stopped, and who promotes this detention, and who does this detention is this fiscal, that is a fiscal from California whose name is Becerra. I pulled this from Wikipedia because it caught my attention a lot. The profile that this fiscal has, this fiscal Becerra, it turns out that in the United States, the topic of child abuse from the Catholic Church, it has been, obviously, they have been taking care of this issue, obviously from the fiscal courts of every state, and it results that the only state that had not incriminated or had not implicated, the only state that did not press charges against any Catholic priest was the state of California. A thing that is very strange because every case that there was in California left to other states to be able to press charges against this priest. So there was some sort of cover up from these elites that are in charge in the Catholic wouldn't go after this priest. So the people will go to other states and press charges against this priest that were doing all this child abuse. And it turns out that they were protecting this elite of the Catholic churches. So what he does, he mounts a digital platform where people could denounce anonymously. So let's take a look of who is this Becerra guy. In the case against the leader of the church, the Luz del Mundo, Nason Joaquin Garcia, the fiscal Becerra, he seems himself surrounded by scandals in which they beat his political interest against the media and the attacks against the apostle Nason Joaquin. Various media outlets published his addition to the Archbishop of Los Angeles, to Jose Horacio Gomez, and to the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. He was mentioned as an honorary member of the Opus Dei. He is also accused by mediums such as Telemundo of not taking to justice hundreds of child molesters, priests from the Catholic Church during his actual charge of California, promoting actions to cover up the malpractice in his current charge of fiscal of California. He is marked as somebody who covers up and promotes actions and marked of malpractices by different media groups. He is also accused of leading a hacking group. This Becerra character is also in charge of leading a group of hackers against the United States guidelines, named by media outlets like Flash Report as a corrupt anarchist. So fiscal Becerra sets up this platform, a digital platform, in which anybody can say without any proof or give an identity or say who they are. And this is how this starts to grow, a phenomenon that is not a wave of accusations that could be proven. There is no evidence. There is no way to do follow-ups because it is about proofs that are supposedly, let's say, exposed by this fiscal. This is the time from which June till February, about 9 months, 8 months. This is the moment where there is no trial. There has no been evidence found against the apostle Nason, but there is, let's say, a barrier to the point to not allow not even the possibility of a bail, to pay some sort of bail. And they set the highest bail that has ever been imposed in Los Angeles. And let's take in consideration that LA holds a lot of celebrities around the world. So they set a bail of $50 million, something that is not payable. $50 million, obviously an amount that the apostle said the church is not going to get this money, but the director said nobody's going to pay for this. This is not just, this is not fair. The church is totally 100% secure and know the innocence that this apostle has. And obviously the apostle Nason said not to collect none of this money. He says this is not just. The church is totally secure and convinced of the innocence and the trajectory that this apostle has had, because he's not a person that is away. The members of this church are not far away from the community. No, people know them from birth, from child. They know their trajectory. He is a person that people see him a lot, and his trajectory is well known. It's proven in many ways of his trajectory. Besides that, a lot of the investigations that are taking place him in dates and situations that is proven that he was not there. He was in another country. He was directing, let's say, some sort of sermon or a preaching. Do you see the background? That is the church of Guadalajara. That is a cathedral. That is the symbol of Guadalajara. Take a look at what's happening in front of the church. There is thousands and thousands of baptisms right in front in their footsteps. Now, it's not an answer to this, but it's a phenomenon that as they take the apostle as a captive person in the 3 months that the apostle was behind bars, there was about 40,000 baptisms just in 3 months, and in the plazas all over the world. So it wasn't the effect that they expected, that seeing the apostle behind bars, people were going to leave. But on the contrary, what people did on the inside of his church, what they did is that they surrounded him. Even though there were many cases that needed to be addressed by human rights organizations, the OU, and there was many instances or cases that needed to be reported in front of human rights organizations, because people started to attack the members, and to the point where some of their temples were vandalized whenever the detention of the apostle Nason took place, the 3rd of June. By the 10th of June, there were already 150 cases in Guadalajara of vandalism, and a total of 500 all over Mexico in relation to the response that people had due to the yellow journalism that media outlets put out there for society to see. And this is how people were reacting to this. And after this, I will answer some questions. This is something I just wanted to show because it's Bello Colombia, and she shows pictures of what's going on. If anybody has not seen them and you see them around, you see their worship services, they cover their head. They got a very particular way to sing. In their worship services, they don't use the instruments. They sing a cappella. There's a place where women sit and a place where men sit. There are worship services that take part every day from 5 a.m., 9 a.m., and 6 p.m. And there is 2 bigger events that take place during Thursday and in Sunday, which is their Sunday school. And I could break down the interior of the actual worship services and stuff that they follow in a doctrine way, but I will answer now some questions. And well, that was the translation that I tried to do the best that I could, but she speaks really fast, so it's hard to stop and get everything. So I have to kind of edit the video, slow down, cut some parts, go back, listen to it again, and form a more correct way to say what she's trying to say, because it is in Spanish and her way of speaking is way too fast. So I hope that this small translation might help more than one person. And like I said, this is just something that I felt that I needed to translate, just so that
at least one of my friends gets a better understanding of what I believe in. God bless you guys.